Welcome to Graceful Healing, a podcast to get straight talk about healing and living again. My name is Maureen Lake. I'm a holistic health coach, speaker, author, and thyroid disease fighter. Each week, I'll be bringing you graceful conversations to inspire you to seek new ways to hit the reset button to catapult your health and vitality to new levels. Listen in and open your heart to all the new possibilities. Are you ready? Let's do this. Hello, and welcome back. Today I have Shelly on, and boy, is she a force to be reckoned with. And I don't say that lightly. Once you hear her story, you'll understand why I say this. This woman is a warrior and a fighter. Her journey from where she began to where she is now is nothing short of miraculous. As a clinical herbalist and integrative health practitioner, she has incredible knowledge and insight in just how to build health around food, botanical therapy, and lifestyle changes. I mentioned pieces of her story to so many people since our interview. It's just truly incredible, and I can't wait to share it with you now. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to share my guest with you, Shelly. She's just got this amazing story that I can't wait for her to share. And I'm just going to stop talking so we can get right to it. Shelly, are you good with that?
Sure. Let's get going.
All right. Can you just share your personal story and your journey of how you landed where you are today? Because I can know that you have this incredible history to share with us.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. And every once in a while, I have to kind of stop and go, whoa, I can't believe I'm here because of where I started. So probably the part that was the biggest change for me is having children. Our oldest child, when he was born early and had a few problems, but they told us he had reflux and it would eventually go away. And it didn't. It just kept getting worse and worse to the point where he was throwing up 5 or 6 times a day. By the time he was 18 months old, he was failure to thrive. And we had, I'd spent pretty much my whole life, morning, noon, and night, taking care of this child and trying to figure out what was wrong. And it wasn't until they did some blood work. And, 20 years ago, they told us babies don't have allergies. So it can't be that. It can't be food. It's got to be something else. And so they ran all sorts of tests. And finally, someone ran a food allergy panel on him. And sure enough, he had some incredibly severe food allergies. And we were really lucky that we hadn't lost him. So basically, he had developed allergies to most of the top 9 allergens, to wheat, eggs, soy, milk.
Wow.
And I was about to give birth to our second child. I was a month away from having a second child. And they said, no more gluten, no more eggs, no more dairy, no more soy. And it was really, really stressful to try and figure out how to feed this baby.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And then they said, at the time, they believed that you needed to stay away from those same things if you had a history of allergies. And so they said, you're going to have to go on this diet as well, because your next baby is more than likely going to have the same allergies, or at least will be predisposed to them. And so I was also put on a really strict diet as I gave birth to the second child and then started breastfeeding her. And she developed completely opposite allergies of his. So it was a really steep learning curve, to say the least. And we didn't have the internet. We didn't have blogs to turn to. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time at the library checking out books and learning about something called celiac disease I'd never heard of before. Turns out I have celiac disease, but we didn't know it at the time. And that was the reason that my children were so reactive, is I was breastfeeding and I wasn't able to process things properly for them. And so a couple of our children also have the same thing. But fast forward, so we made it through that part of our journey, and my kids, were able to become healthy, and they began to thrive, and we had them tested, as was the standard back then. They would test them repeatedly for their food allergies to see if they were getting better or worse. And other than the peanut allergy, they showed that they were clearing up. And so we went back on a traditional Western diet. And with 4 kids in the house, 4 little kids, and I was home for the most part, we were on a pretty tight budget. And so I started couponing. And I became like the coupon queen, but that also meant that I was bringing home things like toaster strudels and fruit snacks, and because coupons are for, processed foods.
Right.
And our full diet became processed foods. And within a really short period of time, teachers started to complain that the kids weren't paying attention at school, that they were having problems regulating themselves. And our third child was diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease, kind of in the middle of all this. And there wasn't anything they could do for him. And so we started down the path of ADHD meds and all sorts of side effects. And by the time our oldest was 10, I had a psychologist tell me that they needed to put our 10-year-old on antipsychotic drugs and anti-anxiety drugs because of all the side effects that the ADHD meds were causing him. And our third child was having some pretty significant side effects from the steroids, as those were the only treatments that were available for his particular disease. And I couldn't take that as the answer. I just thought, no, this is a kid these kids were healthy until we started putting all these drugs in their system. And that was kind of our darkest moment and a big turning point for us. And my faith played a big part in that. I had some guidance given to me by some dear friends, and we started to learn about, I had books put in my hands as I began to search: Nourishing Traditions, Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food. And we started to read everything we could get our hands on about food and the importance of it and how it affects brain development and how it affects anxiety and attention and muscles and all these things. And within a year's time, we made drastic changes to our diet. We got our own backyard chickens. We started using whole milk and whole food products, got rid of all the fruit snacks, got rid of all the food coloring and the processed foods. And by the end of our oldest son's 4th grade year, I remember his teacher came to me and said, excuse me, I'm going to give your son the most improved award this year for the school.
Oh.
And I want to know what he's on, because whatever he's on, I want to recommend it to all my other ADHD kids.
Wow.
And I was able to say, he's not on anything. We did have him on a few herbs, but as far as medication was concerned, it was diet. It was all diet. And I started to explain to her what we were doing. And she was floored. And she said, he's not even the same kid who walked into my classroom 9 months ago. He is so happy. He is so pleasant. He is so on it. He pays attention. He went from having D's and not turning in assignments to, doing incredibly well in his classroom. And that kind of was the impetus that we needed to keep going, that I needed to keep going, and that my family said, yeah, we're going to support you in this. And so from that point on, I started reading. I went back to school to get more of an education in herbal medicine and diet and nutrition. And that's kind of why I'm here today. I think the most surprising thing, though, was falling in love with this way of living, because it was really hard at first.
Oh, I bet it was. Absolutely. My background, I was originally a special education teacher and worked with a lot of children that had ADHD. And I totally hear what you're saying, because even 10 years ago, a processed food diet was really the easiest, quickest way to feed your family. And at that point in time, when you buy into the media and the advertising, you think you're doing okay, like it's not going to be harmful, right?
Oh, it was shattering to realize that what we were feeding our children was causing them harm. Like, I remember laying on the floor in a puddle as I started to learn all these things and going, I didn't know. I didn't know.
I know.
And it was shattering. And it's such a hard transition for people to make when they realize what they're eating and how they're feeling are two parts to the puzzle. They're two sides to the coin.
Exactly. And that our gut is so instrumental to what's going on in our brain. And I know with my own daughter and her healing process, it wasn't until recently that there are other things that were compounding her issues that we didn't know about at the time. And if we had, we could have addressed them sooner, But it's all a growth journey that we go down, and some of it is heartbreaking for sure. But for you, I would just love to hear more about what you learned with your education because I did similarly the same thing. I was at a breaking point in my family. I was like, I'm quitting my job. I'm going back to school and I'm learning how to get healthy for all of us. And that's kind of my journey as well. But your path went a different way than mine did as far as the Chinese medicine and Native American herbalism. It's so fascinating to me. And I'm hoping you can share with us some of that journey as well.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. So the interesting thing was my husband's work took us to Florida, and I started working with the CDC and the YMCA, and they had a program, and I honestly don't know if they still have it because it was funded by Obamacare at the time. They had a program, and it was a study called the Diabetes Prevention Program, and I became a program director for them. I opened up a program in the St. Petersburg area, and I began working with insurance companies and doctors to build this program. And what it was basically health coaching and diet, but because it was based on a study, it was very prescriptive about what I could say, what we could do. And it was still based on the low fat regiment. So we went through and taught over 17 weeks people how to change their diet, to really look at what they were eating. But we didn't get to talk about the things that were really important to me as far as processed foods and food coloring and what's a healthy fat and what's a not healthy fat. It was all about just, counting your fat grams. And people made huge improvements. Like we did see a lot of really good things come from that, because if you're coming from a place of, I've never even looked at an ingredient label to learning about that, that was a step. But I was working with a lot of DOs and nutritionists and diabetes educators at the time, and doing a lot of training in the different medical schools down there to help give access to this program, because they were going to be required within about a year to have programs to refer people to if they were diagnosed with these conditions like prediabetes and obesity and that sort of thing. And I became really frustrated that there wasn't anybody really talking about what was important. We were still stuck in this place of low fat. People would come in and say, hey, I met my fat goals this week, and they'd been eating Sour Patch Kids all week.
Oh my God.
And I had one woman who came in and she was like, oh, you're going to be so proud of me. I made my first smoothie, and she put fruit in this blender, and then she took her Diet Coke and poured it in the blender and made herself a smoothie. And because of the constructs of this study, all I could say was, wow, that's great. I wasn't allowed to talk about all the other things that they needed to know. And so I left that program after a couple of years and decided to go back to school. But but traditional medical school didn't seem like the right fit, because I was educating so many medical practitioners at the time who didn't have the knowledge that even I had. So we started to look for another program, and I looked at naturopathic schools, and eventually found a program called Planetary. It's the East-West School of Planetary Herbology, and I had taken some other trainings in herbalism because I love to garden. It's something that really speaks to me, and we had used herbs in small amounts as with our children and seen some pretty dramatic results. And so I went and I started in this program in California. We moved from Florida to California, and it was about Chinese medicine. It was about Ayurvedic medicine and Native American medicine and diet. And it was life-changing.
Wow.
It was utterly life-changing. It was really amazing. You spend the first year just learning to get your head around thinking about the body the way that they did thousands of years ago, before we had x-rays, before we had CT scans, before we even knew for sure where all the organs were and what they did, like the way we understand them now. And then they teach you how to understand the patterns that have been recorded by these ancient healers for centuries. And we have some really amazing documentation of their work that describe all sorts of things. When people come to me and say, is it crazy that I feel like, my head is getting hot and my hands are getting hot and my feet are getting hot, but the rest of me is not? And I can say, no, that's actually a pattern that's been, handed down for thousands of years. And we're going to look at these types of things in your system and see where you're at and where you're balanced and where you're imbalanced because of this research and this documentation that we have. And it's just incredibly empowering to be able to look at people as a whole person and utilize their framework, and then kind of bring in the nutrition aspect of what we're beginning to understand at the same time. Probably the most influential part of that whole journey, well, there were two things, if you don't mind me going on and on.
Oh, please do. So interesting.
I was really fortunate that at the time that we moved to California and I had started my studies, that the director, the president of the program, and his wife of this school, they were at a place where they decided they really wanted to give back to the community. It's an online school, and then you do travel for intensive courses a couple times a year. And he decided at that time that he really wanted to give back to the community and see if he could improve the time that it took, or decrease the time that it took for an individual starting his program and getting his program from 3 years down to maybe 2 years if they were able to do some intensive work in person. And so he started some in-person classes that I went to in addition to all the online classes and all the reading. And then a couple of months into that, he said, what's going to be best for us is you need to be seeing people. You need to be applying these skills. And so we started a free clinic. There were about 12 of us. And we started a free clinic at the homeless shelter in downtown Santa Cruz.
Oh, wow.
Which is a pretty amazing place because everybody comes to California. They come to the warm places when it gets cold in the rest of the country. So there's a pretty huge population of homeless people on the California coast. And we had, some basic herbal remedies and some basic skills. And he kind of just threw us to the wolves, as he likes to say, on a Saturday morning in January. And we began working with people and giving them herbal resources. And we brought kitchery and some healing foods for them. And we would come back every month. And pretty soon we were seeing people who were coming in, screaming and ranting and raving and completely unable to really communicate with us in a normal fashion. And within a month or two of working with them, giving them herbs, doing some other therapies, like we had acupuncturists, we were able to do some Shirodhara, which is an ancient Ayurvedic oil treatment. People would walk out calm.
Wow.
They were getting off their meds. They were being heard. It was so exciting. And the news of our work spread really quickly. And within a matter of 6 months, we'd opened up 2 more clinics. So we were doing 3 clinics a month, one at a mental health community center and another one at the Veterans Center. And then we were getting the opportunity to go and participate in some pretty awesome veterans events that are held on an annual basis there in the Bay Area, Monterey Bay and Santa Cruz and San Francisco. And we were getting overwhelmed, but and they still have that free clinic. It operates twice a month now. I don't live in the area any longer, but I was a part of it for several years. And just being able to see lives change, and the people who really needed it, who didn't have access to it because they couldn't pay for, this alternative health care that was outside of their Medicare system. And so that was something that I'm very passionate about, and I would love to see more people have access to, regardless of their financial situation. And the other thing that I got to do was I got to go over and study in China.
Oh, wow.
There was a group of us that traditionally, acupuncturists get to go over all the time and study in the traditional Chinese medicine hospitals. They take tours and they'll do intensive work over there for, 2, 4, 6 weeks at a time. And we were the first group that we went over to study just herbal medicine in the hospitals. And we spent a couple of weeks going on rounds in the different specialties: cardiology, endocrinology, oncology. We did some study in women's issues. They have a group called traumatology, which is kind of ER medicine, PT, that sort of thing. And then had lectures. We'd have some of these doctors and professors come in and lecture and talk to us. So it was an incredible couple of weeks of really intense work with these doctors, and it was life-changing. I really thought we were going to go over to these TCM hospitals, and I think most of the people in my group did as well, that we were going to walk into this traditional hospital where they only had herbs and they only had acupuncture and they had massage and they only had, I don't know what we were thinking. And these were modern, clean, huge hospitals where if you were brought in with AFib or some cardiac problems or ulcerative colitis, you got a team of doctors. You had a Western medical doctor, you had an Oriental medicine doctor, and several other practitioners who worked together for your health. Everything was kept in one system. When you went in to see one doctor, they could see what every other doctor was doing. You were treated herbally, you were treated with Western medicines, And when we said, wait, you give Western medicine with your herbs? And I remember one doctor stopping and looking at us and telling us through a translator, of course, why would we not use every good thing that we have available for our patients? And I was like, holy cow. I think all of us that were there were about 30 of us that were there for the whole program, were like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do both, and they work better together. They are amazing together. There was a gentleman that was brought in at the very beginning of our program, of our time there. He was so weak that the Western medicine doctors, he needed a pacemaker, And the Western medicine doctors had said, we're sorry, but he's too weak. He won't survive the surgery. We can't do it. So they sent him home to die. And his family said, let's take him in to see the traditional medicine doctors at this Langhua hospital. And they got him in, and they started IVs of herbal products. They started a diet regimen when he was well enough to eat, and they added Western medicine. And within 2 weeks, he was strong enough and he was cleared to go in and get that pacemaker and go home. And, it was amazing to see. And it was really sad to leave it because I wanted to bring it home.
I think I'm really fortunate here in Denver. It took me a long time, but I found a functional medicine doctor, and she has an acupuncturist, an herbalist, all as part of her team. And it was really the acupuncturist, when she was looking at my tongue, that told me, your liver seems to be a little bit off. And sure enough, they ran tests and I needed to detoxify. And she also diagnosed my thyroid way before my doctor did through blood tests.
Isn't that interesting?
Oh, it's so fascinating to me. It really is. It's incredible.
Just getting to look at people's tongues and then sitting down and feeling their pulse, because that's another aspect of it is those 3 pulses on each side on each wrist. You can learn so much about what's going on internally that, blood tests we just haven't gotten there yet.
And the pulse thing to me is fascinating as well, because I had been going to her for about 3 months after my dog died, which I was so incredibly close to. And even 3 months later, by feeling my pulse, she would say, you're still in mourning. I'm like, how do you know that? I don't get how you can tell that,
Oh, absolutely. And so I love being able to put my hands on people. Now, I do work with a lot of people over the phone and online. And so I teach them to feel their own pulse. And so I do lose a little bit of obviously getting to put my hands on them, but getting people to feel their own pulse and being able to say, when they come to me and they're exhausted and they can hardly make it through the day, or they're getting headache, and teaching them to put their fingers on their wrists and say, oh, wow, like I can barely feel my pulse, or, oh my gosh, it's pounding back at my finger. And yes, it's that middle finger. And being able to explain to them, that's your liver, or this is some digestive issues, or we need to really focus on your kidney health or your adrenal health, or, and they can feel it. And then, when we meet again a couple of weeks later, having them put their hands back on their own wrists and taking that tongue picture and sending it to me and letting them compare it and seeing the dramatic improvement themselves is so fun.
I bet. And it's so amazing that in this day and age that you can do this through the internet remotely and reach so many more people. That's so incredible.
It's been really fun. It was super intimidating when it was first kind of an option when we were getting ready to move again, because you probably have picked up from our story that we've lived in a lot of places for my husband's work. So we're in our 6th state in 20 years. And so I've got clients all over the country, and there aren't a lot of us that do what I do. Now, there's some great acupuncturists out there, but a lot of them aren't trained in herbs the way I am. And there's some great nutritionists out there, but who really haven't got, again, the botanical or the Chinese medicine aspect. And so, when people say, how do I keep working with you? I'm like, well, we'll just figure it out.
Sure.
And that's what we figured out is doing it over the phone and having them learn to do some of these things, which has been really empowering.
Oh, I bet.
For a lot of people.
I bet. So for our listeners, if they want to reach you, are you okay if I share their website on our page so that they could actually go to my website for the podcast and get all your information there?
Oh, absolutely. And I hope one of the things that I'm working on right now is becoming more present on social media. I had been pretty exclusively in the San Jose area until we moved, and we're now in Salt Lake City. And I still travel back there and see people every 4 to 6 weeks. But in order to continue kind of reaching out and giving people more access to this information, I am on Instagram now. And so I have kind of weekly and sometimes monthly topics that I'll go over. Right now, we're doing a lot of things on energy and adaptogens because it's that time of year. People are like, I'm so tired and I've got so much to do for the holidays. And we've done some things on sleep because that's a big part of this. If you're not sleeping well, then, there isn't much we can do to give you energy until that's part of it. So I hope that if that's something that they're interested in, that they would check me out on Instagram, check me out on Facebook, because I do share a lot of information there, and I try to make it really, really relevant. Mm-hmm. and I want it to be reachable. I want them to be able to say, okay, I can take this and use it, whether it's a food or an herb or even, some vitamins and minerals that so much of our population are deficient in, that they can reach for and begin to see some improvements, hopefully right away, without having to sit down and go through a consultation if I don't have time or they don't have time.
And there's nothing worse than feeling like, well, I've tried this and I've tried that and nothing works. And then you get yourself sad and depressed because you feel like you've tried things, and you can get yourself into a real funk really quickly. Absolutely. And the problem is a lot of times people say, oh, take this. It worked really well for me. Well, they are in a totally different body than you are. Mm-hmm. And while, Chinese ginseng is going to work great for one person, American ginseng is going to be better for someone else because they work differently in that body. And there isn't a lot of resources to educate the general public on that. So a lot of times you just end up going to the health food store and grabbing, what somebody recommends without anybody taking the time to go, oh my gosh, look how tired you are. Look how dry you are. Look how, you're heating up. You're having hot flashes. We need to go this direction versus someone who's in a completely different situation where they have a ton of phlegm and they're constantly clearing their throat all day and they're moving really slow. That's going to be a totally different approach than the first person I described. Yeah. And then we're all guilty of taking advice from people that we are well-meaning, but do they really know what they're talking about? It's kind of like buying vitamins on Amazon. I mean, I'm really leery about, getting your supplements on Amazon because is it really what you're purchasing? Yeah. You have to just be so careful. You do. And I'm just so thankful that you've shared your story with my audience because you are like a person that knows her stuff. So it's amazing that you're a resource out there in the community with social media. I mean, that's powerful right there. Thank you. And I hope that there will be more of us that will join the crowd. One last question, and it's a question I ask all my listeners. In one sentence, if you could go back and tell your younger self some advice, what would that be? Oh, wow. I think if I could go back and put my arms around that young mom who was waking up every morning to that stress of trying to figure out what she was going to feed her kids and how she was going to make it through the day, I would love to put my arms around her and say, it's going to be so worth it. Oh, that's beautiful. Hang in there. It's so worth it. This is a blessing and not a curse. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that I was able to get you on my podcast. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Sure. Now my dog's barking, so at least for dog lovers. Yes, we are. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Shelley. You too. Take care. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. This episode is brought to you by my book, The Graceful Advocate: Taking Control of Your Life After a Diagnosis of Thyroid Disease. You can find it currently on Amazon. I love it because my friends call it a purse book. They keep it with them when they go to the pharmacy, grocery store, or even to the doctor's office. It's a great little guide to keep you on track and informed. I can't wait for next week when I get to see you back on the pod. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate you so much. If you ever need someone to chat with about your healing journey, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me through my website at maureenlake.com.